Hi, my name is Alexis.
And I'm Anna.
And I'm Evelyn.
I'm Victoria.
And I'm Katie.
We are the Marmalade Mermaids, and this week our flag means peace. Episode 1, Pilot. Okay, before we get started, Alexis, could you just quickly walk through the structure of what we're going to be doing roughly? We might not do it perfectly, but just kind of what the flow of the conversation is going to be.
So we always have someone who has selected a theme for the day's lesson, or not lesson, discussion. And that person starts off with a story about the concept. Then after we have the discussion about, or we have the story, we go to usually a moment of etymology. Then we look at 4 and we talk about where we saw that theme in the episode. After we really suss it out, we go on to our sacred reading practice. Once that part is completed, we end with a blessing of a character.
Thank you. Now, Katie is going to get us started with a story about peace.
So, I'm excited for the Marmalade Mermaids to meet. I picked the topic of peace. The most recent time when I felt extreme peace was, think of what I might be saying. You're right. When I went to Crater Lake. So before I had like a peaceful place in my mind that I would go to when you did those like visual meditations and guided visual meditations. But for me, Crater Lake was one of those experiences where it was just this deep sense of calm and balance and very awareness of my body, but in a way that was very joyful. And the cold water gives like a really intense, like to me, it felt like a big hug kind of feeling. To thin people, I think they were terrified by it. They were like, what? But for me, it was great. And it was interesting because I think my experiences with the divine, it was very similar to that, in that I felt like even though this was just an experience, it wasn't an idea or an impression or anything, it felt very expansive. And that to me is something I associate really closely with peace.
Who wants to start where we saw peace in the episode? Talked about with just you, she and I, kind of like defining, is it peace? Is it serenity? What were the other ones?
Sometimes it's like, is it comfort? When we're talking about peace, are we just talking about being comfortable? Or we talk about being enlightened? And for me, something I didn't associate it with before, but we've seen this episode like, I don't know, 4 or 5 times. But with the lens of peace twice. And the second time, I really started to think, how closely is peace and my idea of that related to freedom? So I love the idea that it's related to unity and like teamwork. That's my jam. But I also was thinking about how is it related to freedom?
I think I'm really excited for this because I think kind of what you started to with your story about like how you got to this theme, and it's not what I showed up to the episode with, and what I ended up finding, because what I immediately saw is the things we do externally to bring inner peace. And I saw all these actions that we take because we all have these things inside of us. And that's what I kept thinking about is like, how do you quiet your mind and like your like challenges? And so what I kept seeing is the irony of brutality to like, and what you said was the opposite of peace was warfare, and using that to bring peace. And so I have like, that's all I saw throughout the entire episode. And so the one I'll highlight is that like you literally now have a threatened mutiny, and the way that Stede brings peace is an act of violence that was not intentional. And that's what brought that like ultimate peace to his crew when there was this rumbling. And of course, like there's individual challenges that they all got this internal mutiny that they're struggling with. But that was where like I thought was the most powerful, that ironically, like his an unintentional act of violence brought peace to his ship, and they were like totally fine with it. Like they're like, well, we're just gonna ride this out for as long as we can, this peaceful moment.
Yeah, it's so funny because I actually went to Inner Peace as well. We hadn't talked about this. But yeah, I found this like academic paper thinking about like inner peace. And so they were kind of like, again, like trying to quantify it, trying to measure it. And I really kind of like what it emphasized was that, they define peace as like acceptance, transcendence, balance, and calmness. And saying that like peace ultimately comes from personal growth. It's coming from this ability to kind of handle situations that are dangerous or unstable, but you kind of have that inner, ability to kind of stay grounded and to kind of be able to process the emotions and to kind of feel that like not like radical acceptance, but the sort of like radical acceptance of like this is an opportunity for further growth, even though I'm uncomfortable and it may not be exactly what I want. And so, and then they were talking about like the reverse of that is kind of this like restlessness and like irritability and like discontent. Like there's just a lack of peace. And so I read that before I watched the episode again, really thinking about peace. And I was really focusing on who is in that place of sort of like inner peace, like inner calm, like I accept where things are. I feel balanced. I feel kind of tranquil. And that is a reflection of like, they've kind of grown, they've kind of like developed in some way. And I really it's interesting I didn't think about like the violence leading to the moment, but like the moment I focused on was the very, very end, which is like one of my favorite scenes of like the whole series, where he's reading the story after they said they're going to mutiny, after like they have hostages and this guy was killed. And now they're like, let's tuck in for story time. And that they're really kind of just all calm. And right before it, Stede says like, this is my family now, which I never caught before, but he's identifying the crew. I mean, we haven't even met Ed yet, but like he's identifying, like, this is my family. And that he then makes choices about really honoring and making sure that he's looking out for them and what does the group need? Not all the time, but a lot of like, what does the group need aside from myself? And then like going up to the moment with all the flags. Cause he said like, we're going to vote on one, we're going to pick one. And then Frenchie lost his flag and all of a sudden like Frenchie made a new flag and now there's all the flags. And that's kind of like how they're going to move forward, which I just think is lovely. And then kind of layering that with the song that they chose, which I think is it's just a beautiful song that kind of really focuses on seeking that you're like that other half, that soulmate, and then kind of you have to give stuff up. Like you have to grow and you have to let go of certain things to kind of expand into that next phase. And that can be a really peaceful process. So that's kind of where I really saw it, was like focusing on that very last scene.
What I really enjoyed is that the little tidbits that we see from Stede's like personal life as a child, and then the most current with his family and stuff. I really like it's kind of like very interesting how he decided to go into this pirate life, because it obviously seems like he isn't like happy, isn't like at peace with what's been going on throughout his entire life, and everything's always this inner turmoil about like he has never felt like he's been the man that he's supposed to be. And I guess that is also like, you see that with, when he was a kid and then getting bullied, and then even with his family doesn't appear to like really respect him as like the father figure, ignoring him during dinner and all that stuff. And so it's funny to like see him go into this like very harsh life that like expects the leader, the captain, to be a manly man. So kind of going with, it's like, then it turns into he needs to like kind of force himself to grow into what he is like scared to be, from what it seems like the entire time, this like just manly person and everything. So I really like that it does seem like he's trying to be at peace, but it's also like doesn't realize that this is also going to transform him into like the person that he is scared to be, or wants to possibly be, and everything. So that's kind of my thoughts about the idea of like peace and freedom, is that he goes into this world that's just completely what he was scared, like just had been like scared of, and is not at all like what he is and stuff. So I really like that so far with him.
I was thinking And it might not look like it to other people. Like to badminton, he says, like he even says, like you undid your comfortable life to go and become a pirate. So it's like he left what seemed to other people to be this peaceful life for this uncertainty of piracy.
Yeah, but I like that point about like you guys are talking about that idea of like, oh, well, he had this peaceful life, which was like materialistically peaceful. But then like, and I never thought about this before, but the flashbacks are violent and he's really isolated because you have like the moment with his dad and the bird, and then you have like the bullies like tying him to the boat, which is horrible. And then like he's trying to like join in like my favorite horse is named Arthur, and just kind of really being fully isolated. And then at the very, very end, he has this other memory of sitting at the table closer to his family. And so I really kind of think that's interesting. This, what you would kind of maybe I would classify as maybe not a very violent existence, was really violent before. And that he's like trying to go through this new experience, not being that, but then ultimately the peace comes from the violence, which again, like how many, because I mean, there are like moments in the show where it gets really violent. You're like, oh my gosh. But like the moments that they choose to use that, like that trying to find the intention behind the violence and like how it's serving kind of like the other experiences of the characters, I never really thought about before. So I'm interested to like see how that tracks further on.
Because that was something that I thought of before, but I didn't take as much time. That we spent so much time the first time we looked at the episode to really pick out like how much of Stede's actions are intentional in the way he's trying to build a family and a crew. And I really thought like Stede is, it's not just compassionate or empathetic, but he has such a high degree of caring for others, in my opinion. So it was really interesting to me that he chose to tie that other soldier up in the way that he was tied. Like, and I think about systems of abuse, and like when you're abused, eventually you're going to have to become an abuser or stop the cycle completely. So it's just, I don't know. That's just that. I don't know if going through that process is how you obtain peace or how he was like coming to grips with something, but it was interesting.
Yeah, that's fascinating. I hadn't even thought about that. And maybe it's like tying together what Evelyn's talking about too, about like he's using this world of piracy to explore his identity. And so he's trying things on, right? It's just like, I'm going to be a pirate. I'm going to try this on to like bring this peace, because because that's the thing, what we learn, right? It doesn't quiet the voice of badminton.
Yeah.
Like spoiler, but like, and so that's interesting that he thought maybe you're right. Like that cycle. Oh, that didn't work. And another thought I had, to go back to the anime thing too at the end, which I hadn't thought about before, is maybe like the reliability of the narrator. Because I wondered if he was actually rewriting what happened at that dinner table to make peace with what his choice is now, so that he cannot feel bad. And then I like what you just said, Katie, about like then him tying it. So he did these two things, right? He did this like peaceful thing in his mind to like retell possibly what happened at that dinner table, but then also did this quasi-violent thing. And then like, I'm going to try out both of these things and see if I can just be comfortable in my own skin and be at peace.
Yeah.
I think I have a point that supports your idea, Victoria, because when he takes badminton on the tour, they go to and they see the library, and he's like, why would you have all these libraries of books? And they're like, what if there's a storm? And like you see a flash of the books falling. I'm like, and I thought, like, did this actually happen and they just cleaned it up, or is he imagining this?
Yes.
If it's really these flashbacks are his imagination, then that supports that idea.
Oh my God, I love that.
Yeah, and it's funny because this was the first time I watched it where I had that same thought when that like they're all together at the table. I'm like, is that real? Like, are his memories accurate? Because it didn't seem to fit with like the memories before. And then all of a sudden you have this memory, and he like right before like he reads the story, like he's so sad when he's like at the very end of the ship by himself. He says like, this is my family. And I'm trying to figure out like, what is that about? Like, what's that sadness about? And so, and I do like, Alexis, to your point, I never thought about the library part, which again is one of my favorite scenes from this episode, where he's like both trying to hold back the books. But yeah, I think that's interesting. Like, what story are we telling ourselves, like that inner narration, but then also too like what we take in from other people, because I did notice this time that everything that Nigel says, Blackbeard says about like space and the library and the this and then that. He's like, what? But again, like it's the same message, but it's totally different. It's coming up, Evelyn. It'll be in episode 4. You're going to see it. Okay. But yeah, like every single thing that Nigel says, like this is a ridiculous use of space. And like what all this paper and what are you doing? And like, again, like I'd never thought about that, but like maybe it's, I don't know. There's something there about like the narration, like the narrator, like where the message is coming from and what you hold on to and what you let go of. Because then, like you say too, like Badminton stays with him into episode 2, but then never seen him. So,
But we see other. Can we just take a moment for the damask wallpaper? It's got some depth and richness that I had never appreciated to this level before. I'm like, it's got like a color morph. It's got like, I don't know if it's velvet on it. There's some stuff going on that. I'm a sucker for damask. Damask and plaid, yes, sign me up. But that is some peaceful damask.
I think we could go on and on about that room because that does represent his peace bubble, right?
Yeah.
And I think kind of what you're saying about like the judgment of that versus someone loving that space. And I love that he goes in there, right? Like I was thinking about that first time when he opens up the curtains into the window, and then like I feel like that was a way to like bring in some more peace while he's trying to calm down. And then the fact that he's like sitting in that nook to like get peace and like in his like not pajamas. Anyway, yeah, so just as we were talking about the room, you were talking about the decoration. I'm like, well, yeah, because like this is like his like sanctuary,
Right.
which, and it's for spoil, but I won't go into the spoiler, but then that gets ruptured later, right? And so that does represent that peace and people accepting him or not accepting him, which is ultimately him trying to like accept himself. And so anyway.
that's fascinating because I think like, again, like if you start to track it, like who's invited into the room, what conversations are had in the room, like how that is a reflection. And I love that like it's his little peace bubble of like, this is my safe space within the safe space of the ship. Like he has his own little personal private safe space, which I think then kind of goes super, super inward because then you even still like have the bed where he's kind of like, I'm fine. I'm just.
Okay, well, one other note I had.
Oh, go ahead.
Okay.
Mhm.
Okay. Just kind of the idea of peacemaking versus peacekeeping. And I feel like the Navy represents peacekeeping. Like they are going to be the enforcers. It's not at all peacemaking.
Yeah.
Right. And then I also noted it later when Jim can't take it anymore and stabs the guy in the hand, or the knife in the hand. It's like it speaks to the same thing. Like, where's the role of violence in the peacemaking?
Yep.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting that they're reading the story of Pinocchio, and Stede is the one reading it. And I think if I go through the first episode, when Stede is with Mary, Mary's her name, right? He really has this life of like a marionette puppet, right? So him by being pirate, I mean, never mind, I won't say that. Him building the ship and everything, is really that signifying like I'm cutting the strings from this life and trying to live this new self in order to find peace. And hi Miller, his way of being congruent to himself, I find very interesting. And the thing that stood out to me the most in this episode is that when Badminton is saying like, oh, baby bonnet and whatever, and like, you're a pirate, that's totally ridiculous. And he picks up the whale figurine at first, and he has like time. You can see the wheels turning. And he's saying to an officer of the British Navy, like, yes, I am a pirate. Like knowing all that entails. And I'm wondering, like, I think that that's what he had to do for his journey to feel peaceful, is to say, like, I'm declaring that I'm a pirate. and this is how I'm going to be a real boy, whatever that means. Later on in his life.
All right, Alexis, talk us quickly through Lectio Divina, our sacred reading practice for this week.
So we have a 4-stage reading process where first we will randomly select a line from, in this case, our text is the script of the episode from our Flagbean stack.
Alexis, where did we get these wonderful scripts that we're using?
I have had to makeshift put these scripts together from... The first one was actually very nice. It's provided online. It looks like a real screenplay. The other ones don't look quite like screenplays. They're more like transcripts from the closed captionings of the episodes. Then pick a number, and that will tell me what page to go to. And then from that page, I will then number the lines of dialogue. And then another person picks a random number between 1 and whatever it is. And we randomly kind of pick those lines. We will read it through 4 times. The first time is looking at what literally is happening in the episode. And that helps us place it in context. Sometimes our lines are very brief. So it's nice to have some context. Then we're going to read through again. This time we're looking at allegorically, where do we see this idea or this sentiment show up in other stories, in other reading. We're looking for examples of that in our lives. So we are looking in our past or in our current situation where this sentiment shows up again. And the last one, after we have done that, we usually have a moment to sit in contemplation for a moment and think about, because of this, what do we feel called to do? Traditionally, this would be like a call from God, but it could be, or it could just be because of our discussion, we feel that this is something I would like to add to my life. This is something I want to go forward with.
Sacred text. Now let's do the next practice. Alexis, do you have your script?
I do. There are 33 pages. So we need a number between 1 and 33. Who do you want to have do that?
Let's have Victoria pick a number, and then Evelyn can pick the second.
Okay.
25.
Okay. Page 25. Okay, Evelyn, pick a number between 1 and 11.
3.
Okay, this line is part of, it's got little dashes. So it's like something was said before and something comes after, but it's upended your entire comfortable life.
Ooh.
Okay, so the first step is to talk about what's literally happening here. What does this literally mean? Anyone want to have a go? The rumor is that you left your wife and children, and then we see a flashback. And Stede says, upended your entire comfortable life. And he flashes back to dinner with his family. And she's like, what's your favorite horse? And that little scene there. And then later he says, to become a pirate, laughing.
What's literally happening is Badminton is in the cabin with Stede, making fun of him, kind of looking at his books and just being like, you're ridiculous. And then saying what he suspects is true. And that Stede has become a pirate. And Stede is like, screw you and the ship you came in on. And picks up a whale. Like, I'm going to bludgeon you. And then,
Yeah, I think it's unclear if Nigel thinks it's a rumor or he knows it's true and he's like playing it off like I heard, because it's very detailed and obviously like he can see what's going on, and so the whole point of that, like laying that out, it just feels like he's just needling him, like I already know what's going on, but I want to it's like I don't know what's happening, so I can really kind of get a reaction out of you, which he does ultimately, and like I think he gets what he deserves. But yeah, that upended your comfortable life of, like we talked about before, like how comfortable was it actually for Stede?
Yeah, that makes sense. Because I know at the dinner table, he does that thing where he's like, I'm just gonna tease that, like, I want you to take me on a tour, and like, I know you're gonna say you won't, like, oh yes, I would like to, like, you didn't even know, like, he plays it that way. Correct me if I'm wrong. This is where we're looking at, where do we see this allegorically in other stories and other shows, other
Yeah.
books, other lore, whatever. So the line again is upended your entire comfortable life. But I feel like we could put the whole thought together if you wanted to put it in the context of the whole thing. Upended. So the rumor is you left your wife and
I think
children.
every hero's journey, I'm sorry to talk so much, but I think that every hero's journey is upending your comfortable life. Like Harry Potter. I mean, I don't know why that one came to mind first, but because it's Harry Potter and the Sacred Text. That's where we got this from. It's like, why did that come first? But every hero's journey, right? Every fool's journey is like, I'm upending my comfortable life. So I just said everything. That's not helpful at all. Now do you guys go?
I have an idea if you want to keep thinking.
Well, I was going to say, I think that you can see this happen in other characters within the show. Like there's multiple characters who are kind of like they're upending their comfortable life. You know, I think it happens to Mary, it happens to Ed, I think it happens to Izzy. Not necessarily like they are the one doing it, but they're also like they're taking action to change. Like, because there was a level of comfort in what they were doing. There was something that was kind of like that. They're moving themselves into another layer, expanding into something else. And so, I mean, Zhang does it in season 2. I think so. You have like, I have one thing going pretty well for me, and then I kind of do something else. I think, again, like going back to Nigel, something else that Nigel says is exactly like Blackbird. He's like, it doesn't even matter if I'm on the ship. Like, I'm just so bored of like what I'm doing. And so I think that upending your entire comfortable life happens for most. I think everyone's kind of doing it in some way, and having that experience.
Mhm.
Try and be something new.
Yeah.
That's yeah. Go ahead, Victoria.
Oh, no, I just agree.
Oh, I was thinking that so often, like Stede kind of gets to pick, but many times we don't get to pick. Just because we recently watched Princess Bride, I was thinking about the Dread Pirate Roberts, and like it's also the ship called the Revenge, which is so cute. But like sometimes you don't get to pick when your life is upended, Buttercup. Like someone just comes and gets you, right? Like, or the movie Buffy the Vampire Slayer, like she becomes the Vampire Slayer, and all the things that were really important to her become trivial and really stupid, right? And she doesn't see it until her life changes.
Well, and then there are people like Olawande and Jim. They were like, Steve, we don't do this because we like it. Like, this is the life we have because we have to survive. Well, and we know that Jim, it's not just to survive. It's like, you were bred for this.
Also, too, with Jim and Olawande, like, you know that they had a comfortable existence. And then Jim kind of like, not messed it up, but like did something. It's like, okay, now they're on the run, you know? So I think, like, again, like you have all these layers of like, you're going on one track, and all of a sudden it's like, oh, things get up, and there was comfort in where you were, and now you're really uncomfortable in this new place.
Yeah. Or more comfortable. Like Don, he's got to be way more comfortable. But Swede, he's more comfortable. Buttons, he's just comfortable wherever he goes.
No, yeah, I totally agree with Anna, where it's like, it's this, you can really see it that this is really different for a lot of these pirates. Like they expect a certain, there's a certain expectancy when they're going into a pirate life, and this is so drastically different from what they're used to. So I totally agree with Anna there, where it's all like, from what I've seen with at least so far with the like first 3 episodes, like this is completely, this is a different life for them.
Yeah, and I think to what Katie brought up at the beginning with freedom, like this is the cost of freedom, is piracy, right? Ends up being the pathway to so piracy is upending your life, but it's for freedom because they're obviously something they're trying to get freedom from or seeking out. And so I hadn't even really, when you said the hero's journey, I was like, oh no, wait. And then I'm like, oh my gosh, what you just said, I'm like, it just clicked. I'm like, oh, and that's freedom. So
yeah.
Mm.
Well, and I want to take that back, Anna. Like, no, like, but Buttons probably yes. Like we Dawn, Black Pete definitely. Well, Black Pete is not in Peace. I don't know if you're well. You can
I love Black Pete's voice.
He's so great.
um, but they're probably not at peace. It's like those kids you see, and you're like, "Oh, I know your home life is crazy because you're a little hurricane. You're going around stirring up trouble because you're not comfortable when things are like, whether we fight or not, you're getting paid, and so they might not be comfortable being in that situation." I said,
Yeah.
yeah, they might not be.
They might not be. And I think that's an interesting point because I think like Black Pea is someone who is not like, this is not what I want. And I think I never noticed it before, but at the very beginning, like he doesn't want to play cards and then he messes up the card game. And they're like, what? Why did you do that? Like, why take that extra step of like, now nobody can play cards as opposed to like, I'm out. And so, yeah. And I wonder too about like seeing them in season 2, you can see them kind of coming more into who they are in comfort to understand like, oh, like they're just getting by, they're just surviving. But yeah, there's another thought I had with what Victoria was saying off of Evelyn's comment about freedom. Hold on, it's coming. Where is it? Oh, going again to like the song at the very end, the Moondog song, where it's about like this guy who's in love with the flower and he climbs up and then like this voice says like, what you have to do to be with the flowers, you have to jump off the mountain. And he's like, great, go for it. And does it and has this freedom in death, which is interesting because death, like the actual death of characters, and then also too like the not quite death of characters, and then the performance of death of characters, then leads to that next phase of freedom, that next change, or that next transition is interesting because yeah, like that whole song is it ends with like, oh yeah, now we're 2 flowers together. I'm finally like with my flower. And if you want to pick one of us, you have to pick the other. Like we both have to die because we have to be together. And so I think it's interesting of like that idea of death as freedom, like letting that part of you that you've been trying to hold on to or feel like you had to have, letting that completely go and just be like, yeah, like it's done. And now I'm going to kind of move on to the next thing. It's just interesting. I think there's a lot there that I never thought of before.
Who knew Edelweiss was so deep?
I know, right?
That makes me think of Peter Pan too, to bring up another thing. That's
I was going being a Peter Pan.
yeah. And like, that's a very interesting story that Peter Pan is like, it would be a wonderful adventure to die.
Yep.
But it's also very interesting that Peter Pan is based on J.M. Barrie's brother, who did die in like at a very young age and probably was a little bit of a dick.
Oh, I guess another thought I had about Peter Pan was the well, there was the pirate thing, but the thought I was having about was the comfort thing, that taking the kids out, like upending the comfortable life to go to Neverland, like they get pulled from this very comfortable situation. And I'm curious, and it just got me thinking about what are Peter Pan's motivations, right? Because I think there's a little bit of jealousy there, but then also like it's the Black Pete thing too, like just creating some chaos and like not wanting to like follow rules and like walk away from things. And what the kid, are they the darlings? Is that, I can't remember, they're like,
Yeah.
like what they find, right? The experiences they're able to have because they had dreamed about all these experiences. Now they're actually having them, right? Like in Neverland and stuff. So I didn't say anything because I couldn't quite flesh it out in my head. I'm like, am I making these connections? But then Katie, when you brought it up, I'm like, oh my gosh, like there's some Peter Pan stuff there for sure.
Very cool. Peter Pan.
Well, and the way you explain that, it ties so closely to Pinocchio too, right?
Yes.
Because Pinocchio is very naive, like Stede, but
Yes.
he meets the little donkey boy. I don't know, because I've never actually read Pinocchio, but in the Disney version. And he's like, yeah, let's be jerks.
Right.
And that's kind of what Peter Pan is doing. He's like,
Yes.
let's be a jerk with me. It's going to be fun. We're all jerks together. And then they're like, we need a mom. And when
Yeah.
he's like, take me back home, please.
Right.
Also, I kind of like a jerk. She's going to need a lot of therapy.
I was gonna mention Mulan, because I love Mulan and everything about her upending her very comfortable life to go into something that's like so just would be so different, like pretending to be a man and everything, going into war and all that stuff versus just being at home, learning how to be a proper woman during that time and everything, which would have technically have been much more comfortable.
Totally.
But I love that, like, she did that because she wants to protect her family and her father and all that stuff, go through that entire journey, like decide, like, not for herself specifically, but for her like family, to like do something so just really hard.
Yeah. Upend your entire comfortable life. Step 3. What is it?
Oh, what? Do you remember, Anna?
Guess of in our life.
What does it remind you of in your life? Upending your
Personal. Okay. Yeah.
personal connection.
No, I was just thinking of it's like more of a mental, like developmental thing. And like, I feel maybe I've been stuck in, or maybe not stuck, but like, I feel like I'm upending some of my comfortable beliefs or understandings or whatever's. And that can be uncomfortable. And I'm not saying I'm going to become a pirate, but
Are you sure?
I'm open to it. Not question.
Oh, I guess I could say going back to school to go on this nursing journey has been absolute and upending my comfortable lifestyle, because I'm so comfortable at my job and at my home, like with my like responsibilities at home and with my family and everything, and then just tacking on this like giant, just going back to school, especially when it goes to nursing and studying and tests and everything. I'm like, why did I do this? And I have to constantly remind myself, I'm like, no, you really, like, you have to get through this, because yes, you are comfortable right now, but in the end, this is, you're finally going for something that you want to do. Like, this is your kind of dream career and all that stuff. So I have to tell myself, this is the rough part. This is kind of what happens. Like, you have to push through the difficulties and time and stuff, and then you'll get to the point where you want to be in someday, hopefully.
The last step is what it calls you to do. I think I remember years ago thinking, when I go to the gym, I just have to like learn to love the feeling of sweat. And it was so like gross and not comfortable, but just to like learn to love that feeling. And it feels a little bit like the Hanged Man tarot card. It's like, we are so privileged to live in such comfort that any little discomfort is like, ugh, unbearable and like an insult to my dignity. And so I feel called to like lean in and learn to love the uncomfortable. All right. So we now get to pick a character to bless.
Alwyn.
Wishes for Alawande.
Olawande?
Alawande, yes.
Okay. And then what do you see in Alawande that you want to acknowledge and appreciate?
I just love that I really appreciate that he like is the kind of the voice of reasoning in that episode, in the first episode and all that stuff. It's all like, and is trying to persuade everyone like, this isn't really as bad as everyone thinks it is. Like, we should appreciate this. We should appreciate as much as like what we have right now, before things get worse, possibly, and everything. And he has like such a calming nature to him, and he's so just nice and pleasant so far. And I'm like, I don't want anything to happen to him.
Yeah, we were watching it again, and I think he's just the best. But it's hard to pick the best. There's so many good ones.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, Olawande. He needs all the blessings.
Mm.
And we noticed he's given so many outs throughout the story. Like, do you want to stop being a pirate? Because we can have you here. Do you want to stop being a pirate? Because you can come do this. He's like, for love, I'm going to be a pirate.
Okay, then I will bless Jim. Because Jim was not afraid to just end the ridiculousness of the tea party and be like, this is enough of this. And I think that's needed. And so I'm going to bless Jim to keep taking those moments and just keep being Jim, because I think that's important for everybody. But Jim was and then Jim having to hide and like, you know, rely on Olawande to get the support that Jim needs. And so just want to keep blessing Jim to just keep taking those chances and upending Jim's entire comfortable life.
I'm going to bless Stede because he's so freaking encouraging. I just love it. He has really high expectations. And even just like the discussions that we've had and like looking back at all of these, like the traumas that he's had, or like he's so positive. And then at the very end, my heart broke for him because you see him like standing at the bow of the ship, and there's such like his peace was shattered by what he did. But yeah, and like turning that around, this is my family now. Just a blessing out to Stede.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of a good reason to bless this character, but I just kept thinking it over and over again. Black Pete needs to Stede.
It does.
Black Pete was my second choice, so thank you so much for blessing.
Okay.
Yes. Yes. Black Pete. That was also my second choice.
He needs it. And I don't really like care that much. Like Black Pete's not a character I'm like, ooh, I want to see more. And but he is an important part. And he's so much like the teenage boys I work with. He's just in his head. And he's not ever going to be like accepting of what's going on. He's got a lot of restlessness. I'm like, poor ADHD boy, you're on a boat. Like, where are you going to go, dude? Do you need to get out there and row a bit? Like, I don't know. And this like completely age inappropriateness of I'm going to tell these fanciful stories. What? Like, I love that everybody's like, no. And he just like that first year teacher that's like, really? How did you know in place? No, like, I never about this. It's like, no, he is in magical thinking land. And
Your first year teacher.
yeah, he is. He's making all the rookie mistakes. He's like, well, what do you think we need? Okay, let's have some fun. Whoa. But that's still the secret. And people are like, what's this kumbaya crap? But just bless Black Pete because we know grows and develops, as do they all, but he's always going to need some blessings. So let's just start off strong. Black Pete.
Can I just say one of my favorite scenes was involving Black Pete where they were doing the sewing and you know he's talking all this like bad about it and everything and then he stabs the knife into the fabric and he's all like, oh, now I gotta sew that and he's like, oh, I'm sorry. And it's just like that little hint of like he's not that bad.
Well, and this is jumping ahead a little bit, but also when I was thinking of Bless Black Pete, I was like, isn't the rule that you don't get to give yourself a nickname, like someone else has to give you a nickname? And he's like making up this story of how he became Black Pete. Like, what if they all just made up their names? Was it if Frenchie showed up and he's like, I'm Frenchie? And they all just totally, but Wee John, it's obvious. I mean, that's just humorous to call you Wee John, so. Buttons, I don't know how that name came about, but bless Black Pete.
I think Black Pete's a sweetie, you know? I think he's just trying to get by. He wants to be accepted. He thinks how you go about doing it. He like, you know, wants to be like Blackbeard. He's like, I'm gonna call myself Black Pete. Yeah, that's how that works. Like it's gonna be I'm black. Love Black Pete. Let's see. So for me, out of this conversation, I'm gonna change who I was gonna bless. And I would like to bless the room. I would like to bless Steve's room because like everyone needs like their safe space. Everyone needs that like inner sanctuary, and like that room delivers. That room really delivers in so many ways, for so many moments. And like tough times are coming, and it's not the room's fault, but like bad stuff happens, and the room is just trying to hold it down. And I think, you know, just blessings for the room, and all of us are just trying to keep it together. Like I'm just to do what I can. But I think, yeah, just looking at that as like a really beautiful Stede expressing himself. Like, this is what I need to be comfortable. And I think sometimes we can sort of trivialize the importance of that. And I think again, like Nigel does trivialize the importance of the books and, all the stuff. And Izzy talks about later about the furniture and all that kind of thing. But I think that, the room knows who it is. And I think that's great. So blessings to the room.
Well done, all of us. Pound the back.
Hey!
So Anna picked the next theme for episode 2. You want to say a little bit about that?
I did. So I picked the theme of being seen. What that means, being seen. And so episode 2.
Thanks for joining us for Our Flag Means. Next week, Our Flag Means Being Seen, episode 2. We'll see you then.